Afternoon. Welcome to the show. I'm Mary Grace, and I'm here today with Dr. Shawn Baker. We are doing a collaboration, the Healing America and Beyond series. And this was inspired by some interviews that we did with each other. He interviewed me, I interviewed him, and we felt that it would be good to reach out to our mutual audiences and collaborate a couple of times a month to talk to you about what's happening in the health and wellness space since we're having so many changes and hopefully improvements in America and beyond. Good to see you again, Dr. Baker. How's it going?
Yeah, likewise. It's going well. I polished off a 60-ounce tomahawk ribeye about 2 hours ago, so I'm pretty
Is that
feeling pretty
is
good.
that the one that was on your Instagram?
Yeah, I just got done doing that. Yeah, it's kind of funny because didn't I don't really need to eat quite that much, but I got them in my freezer, and I was like, I gotta get rid of these things. And since I'm literally traveling tomorrow, I'll probably fast all day tomorrow. I was like, well, I'll just load up today, and then and then it'll be in my belly digesting for the next 20 hours or something like that. So anyway.
Oh my goodness. So I don't know that I have ever eaten a steak that big, but before the show, I'll tell you what I ate. I ate short ribs, and I like to eat the fat that
Mm.
collects on the bottom of the pan with the gel. I eat it like a little order, like almost like caviar, you know what I mean? And I add a little butter. That's like that that's like a little candy treat, and I eat some of the meat, but I actually like those big chunks of cold fat, cold tallow with the gelatin, beef gelatin, cold, and cold butter. Isn't it crazy? But it works for me.
Yeah, some
Um,
people that really like the fat a lot. I remember when I was a kid, my sister would do stuff like that. She was like craving fat from like pork chops. It was just funny. I
yeah.
specifically remember that.
Well, and it's certain textures too. So, like, some fat is just chewy and it never goes anywhere, but for some reason on the short ribs, the fat gets, I don't know, it's a little more, like, pillowy. It's not sinewy or gristly, and, it just works, and then the tallow that solidifies after you put everything in the fridge, I really like that, and then I cook my short ribs with sea salt and a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and so the gelatin gets kinda salty, but it works for me. I'm more of a grazer, and so the idea of sitting down to a 60-ounce steak, I'm just like, "Give me just a few little squares." It's almost like you know how people like that peppermint bark? Well, for me, it's tallow bark with beef gelatin and butter. It
Yeah,
works.
the people that make little tallow treats and things like that. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I like I said, I don't normally eat 60 ounces. That's almost it's just under 4 pounds in one setting. But it was just one of those things where I'm at the house by myself. The rest of the family's not here, and so I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I gotta get rid of it." So,
Yeah, just got get rid of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's gonna be put to use. I'm gonna go train here in a little bit after we get done, so,
Oh, that's
put
awesome.
to use.
So, and in case you haven't, heard or known, Dr. Baker is known as the carnivore doctor, and so he eats, exclusively the carnivore diet. I'm a little bit of what I would call ketovore, but mostly carnivore, and so, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about polishing off, a lot of meat and, animal fats and things like that, and, that reminds me actually, before I forget, Dr. Baker is pretty well known for his book, The Carnivore Diet. I'll put that link up here because I think it's a really good book for people who are new to the carnivore diet, who are just getting curious about it. It's one of the original, I would say, earliest works on the carnivore diet, and, you can get it right here through the link on the screen. I will link it in the show notes as well. And, there's also a free Audible version for people who have Audible, and we happen to have a link here where you can do an Audible free trial for 30 days. So if you're not quite sure, or if you do a lot of driving or whatever, you like to listen while you work, grab that Audible free trial and then grab the carnivore diet, and listen to it, because you have a 30-day free trial.
Yeah, it's kind of
So
I'll just tell you a funny little anecdote about
yeah.
this, the Audible version. So when I originally initially wrote the book and I signed a contract for, the written version, I also signed a contract for an audio version. And it never came out for like 3 or 4 years. It was like never an audio, and people were like, "Where's an audio?" I said, "I don't know. The publisher's gonna do it." And I was at a conference talking to this guy about stuff, and he called me later and he says, "Yeah, I'm just driving listening to your book." And I mean, "What do you mean you're listening to my book? It's not on audio yet, or it's not on audio." And he said, "Yeah, it is." So I looked it up, and they actually released it on audio. They didn't even tell me. I didn't even know. But they hired a professional actor. It actually sounds pretty good. So I was just kind of, I thought it was like, "Oh, okay. I guess it's
Oh,
not on
that's
audio."
so
So
funny. You
I had to
didn't even know
find
it
that.
was
Yeah,
on.
I didn't even know. Somebody they had to tell me.
Oh,
So it's on
that's
audio.
great. That's so funny. Anyway, yeah, somebody scanned the code, so hopefully we're gonna have another person getting, more information and education about the carnivore diet. And, you know, Dr. Baker, you're carnivore. I'm mostly carnivore. A lot of people that we know are, and yet as a doctor, as a co-founder of Rivero, you talk about really focusing on changing your diet, changing your lifestyle, with the understanding that not everybody is gonna go full carnivore. Um, but one of the things that I think is a big issue to think about when people are thinking about diet and lifestyle is aging. I mean, I just turned 60, you're pushing
I'm
60.
knocking on the door. I'm
Yeah,
58 and some change. So yeah, getting
okay.
there.
Yeah, you're just a baby. And, so but, it's a lot of our audience, a lot of my audience is in that category of either knocking on the door or already past it, and people are taking it seriously, I think, because of what they're seeing with the medical industry, with legacy medical industry. People are thinking a lot more seriously about aging and trying to keep themselves out of that system. And you've been posting a lot about it lately. What's prompted you to do that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, as an aging adult, I have a pretty significant personal interest in this because I'd like to age in a
Yeah,
way that I can participate and enjoy life and remain productive and not be put on the back shelf to be a decoration like a lot of our older folks do. They just kind of get shoved off to the side and kind of become almost like pets in a way. I know it's
yeah,
sad to say that, but there's some reality to that. So, um, yeah, so I'm doing things that I think older people should be able to do and can do, which most people don't do. Things like sprinting and jumping and lifting heavy weights and just and being very bouncy and springy and those types of things, which I think translate into it's better aging, quite honestly. It's protective, it's more resilient. And, I was referencing some studies have come out, and as you know, I'm a proponent of this all meat carnivore diet. And it was interesting. They finally, for the first time, really, they looked at aging populations with regard to things like a vegan diet, which there's just not really a lot of data on that because there's not that many of them. And so, study was just published a few days ago, came out of China, and they looked at 3,000 people that made it to age 80. And then they looked at their dietary patterns and they looked at their overall health. And what they found out is they looked at omnivores. They didn't look at any carnivores. It just wasn't part of their study. They looked at omnivores, so people that ate meat, vegetarians of a couple different varieties, egg eating, fish eating, and then vegans. And what they found was that basically the more plant-based you were, the less likely you were to have a course of healthy aging. That is to say, the vegans, after controlling for all the variables, including socioeconomic status, obesity, exercise, smoking, drinking, education, all those things were controlled for. And they found that if you were a vegan, the odds of you reaching um, healthy aging compared to an omnivore were only 43%. So you're 43% as likely to make it to healthy aging as an omnivore would
mhm,
be 100% likely. So a significant reduction in that. And then they looked at some of the negative outcomes, like having a major health disorder, a major chronic disease. And if you're a vegan, the odds increased by about 70% that you would have a chronic disease. It was 50% more likely that you would have a mental health disorder. And it was 231% more likely that you would have some sort of cognitive issue. So these would be things like dementia, things like that. So When we're talking about aging, we know that obviously protein is very important. So, getting a lot of meat, eggs, dairy is generally a good thing. And then obviously, I think the right amount of fats. I mean, we've been vilifying and demonizing fats for so many years, probably with significant detriment to the population. I think it's because we lump everything as it's saturated fat, it's polyunsaturated fat, it's monounsaturated, but it's really the context of the food. What's it in? Yeah, you can eat a bunch of saturated fat, and in fact, we do. The average American, most of our saturated fat comes from frozen desserts, baked goods, sandwiches, processed food. That's where, we only get like 3% of our saturated fat from things like steak and burgers. I mean, so it's like, where does that saturated fat come from? And yes, you can say cut back on that, but if you're cutting back on that, realistically, you're cutting out basically junk food. And so there was a nice paper, Journal of
Mhm.
American College of Cardiology did in 2020 looking at saturated fat in the context of beef and eggs and dairy products, and they said basically in the setting of those foods, there's no evidence that it causes any kind of things like heart disease, which is interesting. So healthy
Oh,
aging,
so
really
you're
important.
saying that the so-called studies linking saturated fat consumption with a decline in health, cardiac or cholesterol or things like that, that that has been conflated or I guess misrepresented because those saturated fats were coupled with grains and sugars, basically junk food.
Yeah, I
And
mean, the
so
major source of saturated fat in the American diet is not meat.
mhm,
Okay, I mean,
okay.
yes, it comes from animal products, dairy, eggs, and things like that. But when you take an egg and you stick it inside of a cake, or you stick some cream and you stick it inside of an ice cream,
Mhm.
it's very different. Yes, there's still saturated fat in there, but the
Yeah,
nature of the food is so different. It's
okay.
in many cases now it's a processed, in some cases ultra processed
Mhm,
food, and that's where the
mhm.
majority of our saturated fat comes from. And so you've got to put the food in the context of the whole food, because meat has a lot of things that mitigate cardiovascular disease. And
Right,
so it's like
right.
you've gotta be cognizant of what the overall
Okay,
package looks like.
okay, so it's not actually the fat, it's what it's paired with that can make it a healthy food or a non-healthy food, basically.
Yeah, I think
O
it's context dependent for sure. So
Mhm,
that's a
mhm,
fair
that's
assessment.
interesting, yeah. One of the things that I noticed, speaking of mental health, when I switched a little over a year ago, switched to carnivore, I noticed a pretty big drop in anxiety. And I didn't realize that I was such an anxious person, until I lost that anxiety, and it happened in traffic one day when I was driving, um, in an urban area, and somebody cut me off, and normally, even just driving in an area like that because I don't live in the area, I was going up to DC, I don't normally drive there, I I would have been anxious pretty much, you know, the whole time, not like knuckle gripping anxious, but just low key. And, when the person cut me off, I didn't really even care. I was just like, "Okay, whatever." And that's when it occurred to me that that there had been so much like, it's like in the absence of it, that's when I became more aware that it had been an issue prior to that. And that was kind of an aha moment for me because it was only a couple weeks into doing this, and I thought, "Wow, that's pretty amazing." I didn't even think about that as a potential benefit when I started doing carnivore. I was looking more at, controlling my weight and then also addressing autoimmune conditions, specifically autoimmune Hashimoto's. So, seeing that, um, change so quickly was kind of an aha moment for me, and that was one of the things that caused me to look more deeply and to consume even more content about, the carnivore diet, and I guess I don't know, what do you think is happening in the brain? Is it a brain thing? Is it a chemistry thing? Like, how does the how does it affect people mentally as from a doctor's standpoint? How do
Yeah,
do you
I
know?
mean, I think this is
I'm
and
not
this is
asking
this
very
is an
well.
important topic because,
Yeah.
obviously, mental health disease in this country is rampant. I mean, it's estimated something like 1 in 4 people in the United States right now currently are diagnosed with some sort of mental health disorder, whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, ADHD, and the list goes on and on. And you may have heard, I mean, I don't know if you've paid attention, but RFK recently has discussed the carnivore divide a couple times now. He discussed it in the
Yeah,
context with putting the West Virginia governor on it, kind of jokingly
I
said, "Hey,
saw
you're,"
that.
he basically said, "Hey, you're too fat. Let's lean you up." And then the other thing he mentioned, what he says, yeah, there's a doctor at Harvard that's curing schizophrenia with a carnivore diet, and that doctor, I assume, is Dr. Chris Palmer, who I've known for years. Chris and some of his colleagues have been doing work on things like anxiety and depression, and they're showing that things like anxiety in the context of a high fat diet, and particularly an animal based diet, tends to resolve anxiety. And they did a little pilot study, and I think the patients within 7 weeks saw anxiety gone, and another 12 weeks for depression. And so we know that, like, for instance, ketones seem to have a stabilizing effect on the brain, so that mood lability is blunted, so you're not, erratic in your mood.
Okay,
We also know that, for instance, like when it comes to depression, there was a great study out of Stanford in 2018 looking at carnitine levels. And carnitine is a substance that we can make a low level of it, but we primarily get it from our diet. And the only place you get it in diet is animal products. Carnitine sounds like carne, which is, you know, basically meat in Spanish, basically, or kind of like meat in
right.
Spanish. And so what they saw was people with low carnitine levels were much more likely to have major depressive disorder. So if you raise the carnitine levels up, either supplementation or, better yet, through proper diet, then that's improved. And so we see that all the time. So I think certainly that's part of it. I mean, there's a concept of this gut hyperpermeability, or the so-called leaky gut, that occurs from, eating the wrong food, basically, and that leads to uh, sort of destabilization of membranes to include the blood-brain barrier. And so you have this whole scenario where things aren't, filtering as they should. We have some inflammation that's occurring through diet, as one of many sources of inflammation, but a primary one, and that affects the brain as well. And then, not to mention that our brain needs nutrients, and some of those nutrients are not easily found outside of animal products. Things like zinc deficiencies and iron deficiencies are rampant. Particularly women. Iron deficiency is one of the number one deficiencies across the world, and it particularly affects women more so than men, because women have a menstrual cycle, men don't. So we see some of those things, and when you restore those conditions, the nutrients, decrease the inflammation, and store the integrity of the membranes, restore carnitine levels, keep the energy stabilized without having huge glucose fluctuation, you just get better brain function, I think,
Mhm.
across the board. So I think there's a number of mechanisms by which this. Now, some people would talk about mitochondrial health, and obviously nutrition impacts that as well. So um, there's probably hundreds of mechanisms that are impacting these. Probably most of them haven't been identified yet, but the bottom line is nutrition matters when it comes to, gosh, certainly mental health disorders. And as we talked about, aging is kind of, we were wanting to talk on that. Big
Yeah,
difference in people age.
yeah, and, one of the things that you said just kind of I had, like, a little light bulb moment because having Hashimoto's, um, one of the biggest commonalities with that, one of the biggest symptoms is, gut permeability, leaky gut, and, you're talking about this, and I'm thinking, "Okay, this makes sense." The things that are healing with the carnivore diet would that's one of the reasons that I think people like me have some hope of going into remission with an autoimmune condition that traditional, like, legacy medicine tells you can't ever be reversed, that once you have it forever, that you can only manage symptoms by administering a synthetic version of the hormone that your body is not producing. But from everything I've seen, reading about people who have managed to reverse and put these conditions into remission, um, the antibody levels are going down. The leaky gut symptoms are all but disappearing, IBS, things like that. And so it makes sense that, when you're getting that level of healing at the cellular level, that you could do what legacy medicine tells you wasn't possible, because they're not looking at it from a nutritional standpoint. They're looking at it from, a pharmaceutical standpoint, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're trained in as allopathic physicians. I mean, we're trained. I mean, when it comes to what impacts health, it's nutrition, it's sleep, it's activity, it's exercise, it's stress mitigation, it's circadian biology. All these things impact that, but we have this narrow slice of the pie called pharmaceuticals, and that's really what we do. I mean, we might give some lip service to some of these other things, but we don't really apply them. We don't really study them. We don't really have expertise in those things, which is unfortunate because there's so much a physician could do if they would utilize some of these other strategies and fully explore how effective they can be. It's something that I've educated myself on over the years, and it's been really exciting.
Mhm.
I see a whole bunch of questions in the chat. Let me just address one of them on TMA.
Sure. Sure, yeah.
There's somebody asking about the rabbit hole of TMA. TMA stands for trimethylamine, and that's a product that's produced in the gut in response to consuming choline or carnitine. Now, choline and carnitine are rich in animal products, eggs, meat, things like that. And so the concern is that TMA is converted into TMAO, so trimethylamine oxide by the liver, and that has been associated with increased risk for cardiovascular disease. The Cleveland Clinic in particular has been sort of pushing that narrative for a while. Now, the problem with that is that choline and carnitine are actually very beneficial compounds to us. I mean, we know that when choline and carnitine are both liver protective, cardioprotective. And so the question becomes, well, what is going on with the TMAO? Well, one thing is how is it cleared in the body? So one is it's cleared by the kidney. So if you have kidney dysfunction, which means you're already sick, your TMAO levels are going to be higher. The other thing is if you have gut dysfunction, you're going to produce additional TMAO as well, because this is a product, the TMA is created in the gut initially by digestion of the choline and carnitine, but then the bacteria will impact that. So if the bacteria are incorrect, so you either have a messed up gut or a messed up kidney, and then that probably accounts for much of the increased risk for cardiovascular disease. So absent those things, elevated TMA or TMAO due to just consuming choline or carnitine probably has little to none impact on cardiovascular disease. Again, it's one of these situations is we need to know not the fact that something's elevated. We need to know why something's elevated, because there are reasons for things to happen physiologically that are appropriate, and there are reasons that are inappropriate. And it's just like the same thing with inflammation. I mean, inflammation can, particularly if it's chronic, can be a bad thing. But inflammation occurs every meal you eat, every time you exercise, and these are good adaptive responses. So we have to put these things in context. And so I think the problem is we'll see a negative association and assume it holds up in all situations in all contexts, and that's not the case. And so that's kind of that's my 2 cents on TMAO. If you ask me, a lot of people say TMAO, LMFAO, laughing my whatever about that, because it's ridiculous, because it doesn't really hold up. It doesn't really bear up. It's like, yeah, there's an association, but when you look into it in detail, it's not a very good marker.
Okay. Um, I've got a link up here, and I'm just going to share links as we're talking so that people can access some of the things that we're talking about. And then we'll take a break in a few minutes here to highlight some of the things that are some of the sponsors for the show. But I wanted to stay on the track of aging, and I wanted to I wanted to talk about a little bit about just the physical aspects of aging, because you've been putting up some videos about movement, and you're doing things like sprinting and plyometrics and things that you wouldn't typically expect to see from like an old man, um,
Be
somebody
careful now.
that's pushing 60. And, I'm just saying people are coming at you on social media, and they're they're saying, "Why are you doing that? You're old."
Yeah, yeah.
And I just think it's so funny. It's like, "Okay, let's talk about this." Because you have some very specific reasons for doing the things that you're doing. And, I wonder if we could go down that path a little bit and talk about movement and specific types of movement as people think, okay, we're talking about diet, we're talking about healing our bodies, and then what about the movement piece?
Yeah, well, if you think about what you could do as a child or as a young adult without even thinking about it, without trying, without, I mean, running, jumping, climbing, skipping, rolling, and all those types of things that, as you get older and older, you're like, that doesn't look like fun. That's going to hurt my knee. It's going to hurt my back.
You're
I don't want
right.
to be suffering for 2 days if I do that. And the reason for that is, I mean, there's a couple of reasons. We become, as we get older, we become metabolically damaged. We have inflammation, we have joint issues and things like that. Now, those things aren't destined for everybody. And I think that, when I think about aging, what you see is just basically a diminishment of capacity. We walk slower. We can't move as well. We can't move as fast. We struggle to lift things. We struggle to, and that carries over to our mental function as well. I mean, uh, the things that are like our nervous system is involved in movement. When you're sprinting and moving your legs at a very high rate, that requires a nervous system coordination that if you don't use that, you actually lose that. You neurologically can't even do these things correctly. You can't get the firing patterns and sequence for the muscles like they could have, maybe many years ago when things were more efficient. So bringing those things back, and it's not that I was never really spent. I've always been active and exercising, and I've never been really sedentary. But I mean, I haven't really focused on like sprinting at very high velocity for many. When I was playing professional sports, yeah, you did that as part of the training, but even still, it wasn't really focused. It was just part of the game. You ran because you had to, because someone's trying to tackle you, right? So you run. Now, maybe you're not as efficient at it as like a track athlete might be. And so, in order to do that, I mean, to think about, to jog, it's not, you got to do something. There's got to be something. But to sprint at a high velocity requires a tremendous amount of neurological capability, neuromuscular capability, tissue integrity. You got to be able to bounce and you got to have enough stiffness in your tendons so that you bounce off the ground and so you don't just collapse on the ground. So there's a whole slew of things that go into that, and the preparation to be able to do that at an older age, by definition, means that you're going to improve your overall physical being and your overall physical capacity and capabilities. So I think it makes sense to be able to just touch it, a couple times a week. Just touch max capacity a few times a
Mhm.
week, whether it's sprinting, jumping, lifting. And again, I know maybe some of your audience members are beginners, and that's down the road perhaps. But as you get older, you want to maintain that really broad spectrum of things you can do. I'm trying to fit in the camera here, because when you get older and older, and all you can do is walk around the house from toilet to bed to living room couch and watch TV, that's all you can do. So you want as broad a capacity as you possibly can for as long as you can, so that trivial things don't stop you. I like I said, I mean, there's some people where walking around the block is a task, and it shouldn't
Yeah.
be, and it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be. But if you and like I said, the carryover, it's interesting when you start sprinting. And I don't recommend most people start sprinting. You got to prepare for it. You got to train for it. You got to build up the capacity to do so. But once you're able to start doing that, the carryover for everything in life is tremendous. I mean, there's studies out there show that people that do sprint training actually swing a golf club faster. It's just like it just carries over neurologically. You have a central nervous system effect, so that everything can happen at a more rapid rate,
Mhm.
which has a benefit. Now, again, it has cognitive benefits. We know. I mean, there's I mean a complete. I mean, there's stacks and stacks of literature on the benefits of physical
Mhm.
activity performance
Yeah.
on mental health. I mean, that's clear. People that
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
people that regularly exercise, their brain just works better. I mean, that's clear.
It's exciting. I get so excited talking about this because it's you know, we we start hearing even in our 30s, "Oh, you're just getting older. Oh," the just the blanket acceptance and expectation that yes, yes, your body is declining, like, from the minute you're born, right? You're going toward decline, right? It's just a chemical chemist it's chemistry. But at the same time, the idea of living to an old age. I mean, in the Bible, people lived into their hundreds, and there are societies where people are living longer. And when I lived in Hawaii, the elderly are just more active there, and I used to surf with people who were in their 70s, and they were very, very fit. If you've ever surfed, it is one of the hardest sports ever. I mean, I knew, a guy who was a snowboard coach for the Belgian Olympic team, and he told me the first time he ever tried to surf, he thought he was gonna die. He said it was so hard. But so you had these people out there who were so fit and so active, but the mindset, especially in the West, is that, like you said, you're just going to be this house ornament, or, somebody that's just sitting on the porch. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. I think it would be a good time to take a break, and then let's come back and talk about this, because it's very exciting, and I want to ask you some questions about it as well, because I'm sitting here thinking, like, I haven't sprinted in a while and I want to do it, but I also don't want to hurt myself. So I think that might be a good place to pick up, because I have a feeling a lot of people are thinking that. So
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about, let's take a sponsor break. One of our favorite sponsors to talk about is Rivero. That is your company that you co-founded. And I'm going to put the link up here because you're helping a lot of people and you have some good testimonials. Could you share a testimonial with us about somebody that's been recently helped at Rivero.com?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, like I said, Rivero, we are a digital health company that just basically helps people, treat the root cause of the disease. We support them. We, give them daily support. Get them off all the junk food and get them eating well and moving well and all those types of things. And so, yeah, I mean, I was in a meet. I have a meeting. I have a meeting with all the patients once a week. So I open a meeting and all the patients want to come show
Mhm.
up and we just kind of chat. We talk about whatever folks want to talk about. And I mean, we had a person that just started with us a couple months ago, started with hemoglobin A1C 15, so severe diabetes. And
Wow.
now within two months, I think their hemoglobin C was now down to 8. So it's cut in half already within 2 months.
Yeah.
We've got a guy that basically was on something like $100,000 a year worth of autoimmune suppressing drugs, for his condition. And that's gone. Now it's just like I don't need it anymore. So we're saving money, but more important, I mean, that's important. I mean, you can't deny the fact that
Sure.
the healthcare industry costs too damn much. But we're seeing all these people come off their medications, dramatically improve their disease. People losing, somebody. We had one person who was with us for a year, lost 110 pounds. So and like we said, we've only been up and running since right at a year now, and we just kind of gradually got to all the states. So we were kind of slowly started. We started just in Texas and Florida, and then expanded some of the other populated states like California and Illinois and Washington, and now we're basically in all the states. And so
It's
yeah,
great.
it's been really rewarding, and we just get more and more physicians want to work for us because they're like, you guys are curing patients. That's why I went into medicine in the first place, not just to be a drug pusher, not just to be I mean, because a lot of physicians actually just they don't like it. They're just like, man, it's just like, yes, it pays the bills, I get paid well, but I'm not doing what I thought I was going to do when I started.
Yeah, I mean, you described it as disease management, and I think that hopefully more and more physicians are going to be going away from that, and I'm hoping that we can see more changes too as we get a handle on, how much control the insurance industry has over people's health. I mean, we could have a whole show on that. But the link is up here on the screen for anybody who wants to contact them. It's revero.com, revero.com. And the link is right up here. And we'll also put it in the chat here for anybody that wants to access it. It's very exciting, all 50 states, and you're not overseas yet. If anybody is looking for a way to contact a doctor that can help them overseas, we do have another functional medicine team that we work with. So you can send me a message, and we'll get you that information. But for now, all 50 states, Rivero.com, and they're helping so many people. And so it's exciting to be able to share this. Also, I wanted to feature your book one more time. We talked about it at the beginning, The Carnivore Diet. You can scan to order here. And if you want to listen to it on Audible, you can get an Audible free trial. And the book is actually free to Audible members right now. So it's a win-win situation, 30-day trial. And you can download that. You can download that link, and then you can get the Carnivore Diet book on Audible uh, basically for free and be able to listen to it on Audible, and that's great. You can max out your exercise time and your walking and your movement with reading The Carnivore Diet. The other thing I wanted to feature here is one of our best sponsors here at the show is the Grid Down Chow Down company, and this is a company that makes freeze dried American grown grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And what they do is they have a setup to where you can stockpile your beef without even having to have any electricity. So if the grid goes down, you can still chow down. That's how they came up with their name. And so they've got these wonderful packets of freeze-dried beef. They now have hamburger patties as well. And so you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is add water and cook, and you don't even have to form the patties. How's that for, like, catering to the American consumer? Griddownchowdown.com, use promo code Mary Grace, and you're gonna get a great deal on that. If you subscribe to the ground beef, you get a special deal. If you do the 24 serving subscription, you get 4 servings for free. That's griddownchowdown.com, promo code Mary Grace, and that is gonna be in the comments here. You can access that link. So I hope everybody will take advantage of that. It's a great deal, and these are American farmers and ranchers. Shawn, you were talking recently about how few American farmers and ranchers we have, and how America is not producing enough meat. So we definitely want to take advantage of being able to support these American companies, these American farms, so that they can stay in business. Because if we don't, they're gonna go away, and we want to keep those companies here. So every time you buy from these guys, griddownchowdown.com, you are helping to keep an American farm and ranch going. And that's super important to us, especially the carnivores. We need our meat. Okay. So back to this, let's talk about the exercise, the movement piece. Um, you know, I'm 60, and I can't remember the last time I was able to sprint, like, comfortably without thinking of pulling a muscle or something. And having an autoimmune condition definitely makes it more challenging to do certain things that I would normally do without any problem. So how does somebody who has either excess weight or, another condition that they're dealing with, or just is out of practice, how does somebody get there? I mean, you're doing these full on sprints on your Instagram. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, that looks like so much fun, you know? So how do we get there? How does the average person get there?
Yeah, no, it's all AI. No, I'm kidding.
It's
I think that, obviously, if you're 100 pounds overweight, don't go sprint. You're just going to get hurt. I mean, I think
Yeah.
you got to work on that thing. So there's other things you can do in the meantime. Walking, you can, and you can do. I mean, sprinting, as we think about a runner sprinting, is a definition which is a little bit separate from like sprinting on a bike. You can do sprints, which really refer to the intensity and the duration, which is usually a high intense short bout thing. And sprinting, when it comes to energy systems, is usually something that lasts 5 to 10 seconds, somewhere in that neighborhood. So if I get on a bike, an exercise bike, that's a good entry point to start, because it's harder to get hurt on an exercise bike, unless you
Okay.
fall off, which, I mean, gosh, if you're sitting there and pedaling, you're not likely to pull your hamstrings, you're not likely to
Yeah.
pull a muscle. Whereas when you get on the ground and you start sprinting and you start experiencing those tremendously high forces, I mean, at max velocity, our quads and I should say our hip flexors and our hamstrings can see 10x body weight. So for somebody like me, weighs 250 pounds at a max sprint, I might be putting 2,500 pounds of force through my hamstrings. I can't do that in the gym. I mean, there's no way I could squat or put that much weight on my back. I mean, doing a full out isometric, belt squat isometric, which is one of the most forceful things you can do statically. I can get to maybe 1,300 pounds of force, but that instantaneous force across there is what tears you apart, particularly when you're not prepared for it.
Okay.
And, you have either bad mechanics or, you're just not ready for that. So I think, the sprinting concept from an energetic standpoint, you could do on an exercise stationary bike. I like the ones with the arms, because that gets you that idea that
Right.
I can go fast. And then the other thing that's important about sprinting, irrespective of how you accomplish that, is you recover adequately. So it's not like you're doing 5 seconds on, rest 10 seconds, go 5 seconds again. It's 5 seconds on. You might be taking 30, 40 seconds rest in between, or you do 10 seconds on, take a full minute rest, because you want to be adequately recovered so that you can hit the intensity level again. Because sprinting is all about intensity. And hitting that maximum intensity is what keeps that capacity real far. I mean, anybody can go out and jog. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, it's not to put down jogging, but I'm just saying it's not going to raise your overall capacity. You can raise that bar. And what happens is people that can run really fast find that running very slow is quite easy. Whereas people can only run slightly faster than slow. It's a struggle just to run slow. The
Okay.
other thing is, and I know Huron was on with the guy from Altus, Stu McMillan, one of the top track coaches, talking about skipping. Just skipping. Get
Mhm.
used to just skipping. Because you remember when you're a kid, you
Yeah.
play hopscotch, or you skip to my Lou, whatever
Yeah.
that stuff, and it's actually fun to skip, and it looks goofy when a big 250-pound man's out there skipping. People think I'm crazy, a psychopath, but it's
Just
actually
don't put on a dress,
yeah,
please.
I don't have a dress when I'm doing that, but I mean, it's actually if you were like to Google any of like the current or even past world champion sprinting athletes like Noah
Mhm.
Lyles and some of these guys, you watch them warming up, they're the same thing. They're skipping, they're hopping, they're bounding, they're jumping, they're doing little pogo hops. And that's how you do it. You just kind of train your body to bounce a little bit. You let it there and start being bouncy, and you want to bring back some rhythm. You just want to have you almost like put on music, and almost like you're dancing, like you just go and bounce in place to music. That's a good place to start. And I know a lot of people are like, well, they like rebounders because there's no stress on the body. You can bounce
Okay.
and move around. You're moving your blood around. You feel good. But the reality is, those rebounders are depriving you of some very, very important stimulation, and that is that contact with the ground. That contact, those small collisions, they don't have to be big collisions to start with. They can just be small little bounces, just jumping from one foot to the other, just doing like that. That's going to provide stimulus to the bone. So the bone mineral density increases. So you decrease your risk
Mm.
for osteoporosis. Incredibly important for women, particularly older women. And then you can talk about tendon stiffness, because we're supposed to skip across the ground like if you throw a golf ball across the ground, it's going to bounce really hard and take off, because it's so
Mhm.
elastic and it
Yeah.
has so much stiffness in there, so it doesn't deform very much and then it explodes out. Those are the properties we're trying to develop within our tendons, our Achilles tendons, our patella tendon, quad tendon, our gluteals. And so that's something that can come with, doing things like isometrics, where you just, like you stand on your tippy toes, maybe some weights in your hand, and you hold it there for a couple minutes, if you can.
Okay.
So like, there's different types of isometrics, these overcoming isometrics, where as hard as you can push, it's like what I do on a machine. Or you put a bar on your back and ram it into a thing that's not going to move, and you just try to drive it up,
Mm.
trying to contract your muscles as hard as possible. Those
Interesting.
things are not likely to hurt you, but they allow you to experience those high forces without the risk that comes with motion in there. So
Oh, the
isometrics can be quite good.
impact.
Yeah, the impact, and then quite honestly, just the range of motion that can be challenging to deal with. So I mean, but I think it's and when you do start to sprint initially, you start with accelerations, 5 meters, 3 steps, because where you get hurt is when you start reaching maximum velocity. So, and that for most people is going to occur somewhere between 20 and 40 yards. I mean, elite level sprinters
Mhm.
are hitting that at about 60 meters in, because they're hitting such high velocities. For the average person, they're going to attain their max velocity within 20, 30 30 yards for most of them. So you do these short 5, 10 yard sprints for a while.
Mhm.
You get used to that. Maybe get on a hill, because a hill, what a hill does is it helps to correct some of your acceleration mechanics, and it slows your limb velocity down, because this is what's happening when you're sprinting at max speed. Your legs are really moving fast, and
Right.
that requires neurological coordination. So when you slow it down through running up a hill or pushing a sled or something like that, that allows some of the intent to be there. In some, the hill sprints kind of put you in favorable position
Mhm.
mechanically for the acceleration. Because normally, if you look at a splinter, what they do, they come out of blocks, so they're kind of leaning forward for that first 30, 40 meters, and then they
Right,
start to come
okay.
upright, and that's
Very interesting.
that's the
Yeah.
acceleration component of that. So, I mean, it's very technical, but I mean, I
Mhm.
think the thing is, just start with bouncing in place. These are very low intense, we call it extensive plyometrics, where you bounce, switch feet. You'll bounce on 2 feet, stagger your feet, bounce together, then switch your feet, bounce, bounce, bounce. And then you can start as you feel comfortable. You can try to get a little higher. So maybe you're just bouncing two
Mhm.
inches off the ground. Now you're 6 inches off the ground. And then maybe you're getting a foot off the ground if you can really do that. And then you start bringing your arms in to swing you up in the air, all these things. You can start with your hands on your hips, just to kind of take that upper extremity out of it, and just work on your legs. And
Mhm. Mhm.
that's what I would play with for probably a couple months before I ever
Okay.
got out there and really
Okay.
started pushing myself. Because yeah, so get out there, bounce, skip, hop,
Yeah.
get on the bike and sprint on the bike, because you can get the
Isometrics. Okay.
cardiovascular component of
Yeah.
that in there.
That's very helpful.
and
Thank
then
you.
and then add some isometrics in there, where you're just doing holds. You might find that you can hold, you take some dumbbells in your hand, stand on one leg, support one leg, and get on your tippy toes with just one leg. It's better to do single leg isometrics, because what happens is some of the adaptations are occurring due to fatigue. And if you got two legs on the ground, well, guess what happens when one leg is tired, the other leg takes over, and then it switches back and
Mm.
forth. So you really just want to do one leg. Like, I'll go into like the leg extension machine, and I'll do a one-legged leg extension, and then kind of get back, drop it so there's tension on me, and then hold it for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever I can tolerate.
Mhm.
Those things are going to provide adaptations for tendon health, right? I mean, that's like if you got an injured tendon, unless you got tendonitis in your ankle or your Achilles or your biceps, you can do these prolonged isometric holds, to the point where adaptations occur. Because normally when you have an injury, we have this concept of stress shielding that occurs. So what happens is the rest of the muscle and tendon takes up for that injured area, so it doesn't see any stress. It tries to protect it, protect it, protect it, which relieves it from pain. But what it doesn't allow for is proper healing, because the healing requires tension.
Mm.
When we want something to rebuild, it's going to remodel to the stresses it's supposed to see. And if it's never seeing those stresses, it doesn't remodel correctly. So by doing an isometric to the point of fatigue, now that has no choice but to experience some of that stress and strain, and then it starts to respond appropriately. So if you're dealing with like a chronic tendon problem, that, in addition to, of course, diet, I'd be remiss not to mention the fact that diet is important for healing. If you got an injury,
Mm.
increase your protein intake. I mean, if you're going through surgery, increase your protein intake. It's going to help you heal faster and better.
This is it's fascinating. I'm gonna go back and listen to this. It's so interesting. And I'm thinking about, like, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I used to do, paddleboard racing in Hawaii, like open ocean racing. And now living inland, I paddle on the lake sometimes, but I haven't taken my race board out. But now I'm getting inspired to get my race board out, because one of the things that you practice is, um, getting off the line, and you do that by sprinting, right? So because you wanna get out in front of the pack,
Mhm.
as quickly as possible. And so now my wheels are turning, right? I'm like, "Okay, I can get out on the lake. I can do a pretty leisurely paddle, but I can also do some really short sprints that will help me to develop some of that strength." Now, the weight bearing isn't as much, which may be good for somebody like me that, is working up to it. So it's encouraging, it's very
So
exciting.
one thing I would encourage you to do, if it's
Yeah.
possible, like if you're doing sprints,
Uh-huh.
you should be timing yourself somehow. Whether
Okay.
it's, on a paddleboard, I don't know how you do it. I mean, maybe you have somebody time you, like stopwatch, start, go. I because
Mhm.
I'm pretty serious about it. I bought a little timing gate device, which I use for my sprints. So I lay these two things on the ground and I put them exactly 10 meters apart or whatever distance I
Okay.
want to use. And then it has a Bluetooth and it registers when I cross, when I cross, and it can tell me exactly how long it took. So that, because,
Mhm.
and then what happens when you time yourself is you get acute feedback, what's working, what's not, and you just kind of intuitively fall into the right um, pattern
Mhm.
because you're like, okay, I tried it, but I got slower. I'm going to try something else to see what gets fatter because there's obviously optimal technique or I shouldn't say optimal. There's consensus technique which people fall within, but there's variations within there. So you can't just say you need to run exactly like Usain Bolt or whatever. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
he's going
Mhm.
to do some things different than another guy who might have quote unquote less. I think a lot of people are critical of Usain Bolt's form. They're like, well, he's not doing everything technically perfect. Yeah, but he's got the world record. So it's working for him, right? So it's
Right.
like, so you just
Yeah.
kind of fall into what works and it kind of teaches you timing things, teaches you to figure out and progress. And it's also motivating. It's
Mhm.
like, you thought you were fat. No, I wasn't. Well, let me, and it stimulates you to go faster. So you could
Right.
say like, I'm going to sprint on my paddle board for the first, I don't know, 10 strokes or whatever a sprint might be, an acceleration at the
Right,
beginning.
that's what I was gonna say, if you count your strokes or if you have markers, so if you're sprinting between
Right, right.
buoys or something, right?
No, exactly. You can know
Or like
you can know how many paddles did it take you to get there. Like I tried to get
mhm.
it in 10 and this time I got it in 9. Or if there's some way you can time it. I know that with a paddleboard, your hands are kind of tied up, so it's gonna be hard to hit a stopwatch. But
Yeah, yeah, you
I mean,
have
I guess you
your
could.
watch
You could
on,
wrap it around your
yeah,
hand and then just touch it with your thumb and go, and then
something
touch
like
it real
that.
quick at the end. And as
Mhm.
long as you don't fall out of the fall into the
Yeah.
water. The one time
Well,
I tried paddle boarding out into the water a few times. I
I
remember that.
That's one thing I'm really good at. I have thousands of hours because I lived in Hawaii, so I did paddleboard surfing too, but, and, totally missed that, but, when I used to swim and I was always working on getting more efficient at stroke mechanics, you count your strokes, from wall to wall, and as you get more efficient, you have fewer strokes. So, you're going faster in fewer strokes. So I get the concept, right? That you're not just beating the water to get from point A to point B. You're actually becoming more efficient and faster and stronger in the process. So this is fascinating. We're getting some interesting comments here too. People, Karen is saying on Facebook, this is Dr. Baker explains this so well. I think so too. I definitely want to go back and listen to this and get some ideas because it's very encouraging, especially when when you've been struggling with certain things, especially like with frequent injury, which is something that seems to have plagued me for a long time, and I imagine other people as well. And what you said about not trying to start running when if you have 100 pounds to lose, I think that's such a big, important thing for people to hear because we see these shows like The Biggest Loser, and they've got people out there running. And I imagine that's probably the worst thing they can do. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's setting them up for injury. I mean, there's a there. I mean, again, and when I'm talking about sprinting, it's a very specific. It's not out there jogging. I mean, it's aggressive arm swings. There's
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
positions you're hitting, and that provides tremendous stress to the body, and you have to have adequate strength to weight ratios. You got to have a certain requisite strength to do that. And if you're 100 pounds overweight, you're just probably not there. So your time would be better utilized maybe rucking, just walking, getting in there,
Mhm.
maybe put a little weight vest on and go for a walk. I mean, you're already carrying a weight vest around. Maybe you do that for a while, and then as you lose 20 pounds, put 20 pounds of a vest on and keep that stimulation going until you get into that range where it becomes more reasonable. I think someone who is
Okay.
at normal body weight or approaching normal body weight is going to be more safe to be doing these types of things, or
Okay.
unless they're incredibly strong. I mean, I saw a
Yeah.
kid at the NFL Combine weighed 464 pounds, 6'6", 464, and the guy was running around like a five. That was like a 5'8", 640, which it's not blazing fast, but for a
Yeah.
464-pound man, that is
That's
incredible momentum. I mean, that is like incredibly fast for somebody that size. Um,
464. Can you imagine? I mean,
it's like a bull or something running at you, like a baby cow, like, mowing down like a teenage cow coming down the road at you. It's
Mm.
frightening to see,
Imagine being a quarterback and having that, like, it makes you understand the importance of the O-line, protecting you.
yeah, I mean, that's for sure. I mean, the
I
guy will
mean
probably I don't know what his career will be like. I mean, there's some people that will say, interestingly, even with offensive linemen, the ones that run faster have longer careers. That seems to
Mhm.
indicate longevity, for whatever reason. Not that
Yeah,
strength is unimportant, not that mass is unimportant, but the ones that seem to be able to run at a decent speed, top speed, tend to have a better career.
that's
Interestingly.
interesting. And it's interesting, the things about aging too, I think a lot about aging because my stepdad, I live with him and I take care of him and he's 87 and he recently went through a stroke. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this is when my mom died in 2020, and I told her that I would take care of him, um, one of the first things that one of the most important things to me was to keep him moving. And I just instinctively knew that especially we were going into winter, it was September, and, you're kind of grieving and going through loss, but at the same time, the last thing you wanna do is be sedentary. And so I had to think of creative ways to get him up and moving. And one of the first things I did was ask him to take over feeding the cats in the mornings because he didn't have a specific role anymore, as getting up and making my mom's coffee and things like that. And so I kind of tried to shift his attention. And so he would get up every morning, get up, feed the cats, let them out, things like that. And it's kind of interesting because the cats actually have become partners in keeping my dad moving. And what I mean by that is that my dad sits in his chair beside the sliding doors on the deck, and the cats, they know he can't hear that well. And so instead of going to the back door and crying to come in, they go to the sliding door and they like jump up and put their feet on the sliding door so he sees them, and then he'll get up and go let them in. So they kind of, conspire with me to keep him moving. And our one cat is a little neurotic, so he'll go in and out like multiple times. So I'm like, "Good job, guys. Good job." And so it's just very interesting because, when my dad had his stroke, so my goal has always been to keep him moving and going outside, gardening, going fishing, things like that. More, not so much gym related, but natural life movement, walking around the block, things like that. And the day before he had his stroke, we were at the pool, we were swimming, and then, we went for a walk when we came home, and then the next day he had the stroke. Well, when the therapist came in to get him up out of the bed 24 hours after the stroke, everybody was surprised at how strong he was. And they told us that day that he would be a candidate for acute rehab. But the thing that really got me when he was in the hospital was that most of the doctors, I could tell just by their, not so subtle language, that they never expected patients his age even to leave the hospital, or they never expected them to go to acute rehab. Acute is where, they have a goal of getting better and going home. They mostly expected patients his age or even younger to go into sort of like transitional rehab, which is where you would go to die, basically.
Yeah, basically
And
kind of a hospice care situation,
yeah, and
yeah.
so it's very interesting because, when they told us that he was qualified, that he would be qualified for rehab, that just put a fire under us, and we spent the whole time in the hospital showing him videos and giving him, showing him pictures. We had a digital frame and just saying, "This is you. This is you walking. This is you in the garden. This is you with your cats." Like, that was kind of what we did to prepare him for, the goal. of leaving the hospital and getting stronger rather than going into that, you know, kinda hospice situation. And so now he's home, and he just went to therapy today and did, like, I think 17 minutes of endurance with walking and cycling, which is so exciting, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's and you said I think you said he's what, 87 or something like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, this is the thing is as we all have sort of some control over our destiny as to how we're going to age and things like that.
Mhm.
And this is what I talk about, keeping yourself relevant, productive, purposeful, because to say that my job is to let the cats go in and out. I mean, that's great. I mean, it's a good thing. But I
Right.
mean, it would be better if he said, look, I'm building something in the garage. I'm like I said, because
Mhm.
when you lose that physical capacity, that's what you're
Right.
limited to. Your job is now just to stand up and walk and open the door, when it could be like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
taking the kids to school. Hey, I'm grocery
Right.
shopping. Hey, I'm
Right.
doing all these productive things. So I still become a valuable member, because that, I think that's part of the aging. I mean, that's the social connections
Mhm.
that you have to have. And
For
if you're
for
just
sure.
like I
Yeah.
said, if you become, like you mentioned, an ornament, a household
Y
ornament,
yeah.
which is what a
Yeah.
lot of people are relegated to. It's
Yeah.
it's the end of life,
And I
basically.
guess I use the story about the cats because I think without I'm pretty sure that without that, I don't think he would still be with us,
Yeah,
right? Because
I'm sure, yeah.
he was in a place and then the other thing we do is, gardening. So he does have there's other things that we do. That was just sort of like the way that was my strategy for kind of getting him to that point where I could even say, "Hey, let's go work in the garden," right? And so he does have other things. We're going fishing tomorrow.
Good for
So
him. Good for you guys, yeah.
yeah, 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 and, we did our burn pile last week because we never got it done, in the fall because it was 6 months ago that he had the stroke. So we were out there, burning leaves and so there's been some cognitive issues as well. So we're working on getting that back as well. So, um, I'm grateful that he's still with us,
Yeah, I was gonna say 87 is up there. I mean, he's lived well beyond life expectancy,
I
so, I mean, this
know,
is
I
all
know.
bonus. I think anything past 80 is bonus time for
It's
sure.
it's amazing, yeah, and
And
I knowing what I know now, I mean, it motivates me too because I wanna be, you know, I wanna live a long life, and I wanna live a long, healthy life,
yeah,
active, like you're saying, productive life.
yeah, I mean, I
Um
think it's interesting that we are in the first, to my knowledge, ever in history, time where there are people that have been active, exercise, gym, strength training their whole life. I mean, prior to this, we're starting to see guys like Stallone and Schwarzenegger and some of these other guys that were obviously very muscular, very, very physically fit early in life, and they just kept doing it. And so they're still
Mhm.
pushing 80, still in the gym, still look like they've got, despite what you might think of some of those guys, they still look like they've got most of their faculties and capacities. They're far better than the average 80-year-old. I would just have to say that. And so, how long they're going to live, I don't know, but I mean, they've at least got 80 years of pretty vigorous life. And
Yeah.
I do think we're going to start seeing more and more people make it to 100. More of them are going to be more physically robust, because most of the 100-year-olds that I'd met in my career as a surgeon, I mean, almost without exception, they were old ladies who had broken their hip, and they were on a stretcher, and they were demented, and they were in a diaper, you know, usually a urine-filled diaper. And it was just like miserable existence. It was just like, this lady's here. She's like a skeleton, broken hip, doesn't know where the hell she is. That's no way to live, in my view. And I
No.
know I get it the last few years, but I mean, there's a lot of people that spend 5, 10 years like that, where it's just like they're
Mhm.
bedridden. They get all the bed sores. They get all these sacral decubitus ulci and heel ulcers, and then those get infected, uroseptic. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you got to stay moving, and
Yeah.
it's not enough to walk. I mean, I just don't think that's
Mhm.
enough. I mean, I think what's going to happen is, if all you can do, if in your 50s you say, "Well, I'm going to start walking," and that's all you ever do, by the time you're 70, walking is going to be a chore for you. I mean,
Mm.
walking should never be a chore, in my view. It should be.
Yeah.
It should be.
Yeah.
You shouldn't even have to think about it. Like, people think, "Oh, I got to get up and walk. Oh, that's going to be, man. I got to mentally prepare myself to walk."
Yeah.
It's just like, you should not. I mean, that's why I'm talking about keeping that capacity high.
Mhm,
So if
mhm.
I can sprint, then walking's not a problem. I guarantee you.
Right.
I mean, I can walk around I can walk around. I mean, I sit there and do holds with one hand, 220 pounds in one hand, and stand there with a minute with it in my arm. So guess what? Carrying the suitcases around the airport is no big deal. But there's people out there, you see them, they're in the airport and they're waiting on the wheelchair and they can walk, but it's just like, well, it's all the way down. God, it's like a quarter mile to the gate. I don't want to walk that far.
Mhm,
So you don't want to be that person. I mean, I'm not to say these are bad people or anything, but if you can avoid that, gosh. And this is where doing these things we talked about, eating plenty of protein. Don't be on a stupid plant-based diet that's going to destroy your aging capacity.
right,
Get in
right.
there, do some strength training, and then get your body composition down, get stronger, and then start to move, and then start to use it, and then start
Mhm,
bringing back those capacities like childlike capacities, which are running and jumping and skipping and
yeah,
hopping and climbing and throwing and all those things that we used to be able to
mhm,
do. And I
mhm,
get it. Some people have. I know somebody talking about they've got their back is fused, and yes, there are limitations, and some of those things we can't avoid. But you do what you can. Maybe you get in the swimming pool. Maybe you can row. I mean, there's lots of things you can do where you can raise
mhm.
that bar.
Very interesting. One of the things that I talk about sometimes is the idea of, you know, like getting on the floor and getting up. And I heard one time somebody saying, if you can do that, if you do that every day, then you won't lose the capacity. Because one of the things that happens to old people is they fall and they can't get up.
Yeah,
And
you
they,
remember
they
the
don't
old
even
TV commercial? Yeah, help! I've fallen. I can't get up.
right.
The
And
life
they
alert
don't
thing.
even
Yeah,
have yeah, they don't even have the muscular integrity to get themselves up. And one of the exercises I like to do is the Turkish get up. Are you familiar with that?
yeah,
It's
of
like
course.
a
Yeah, yeah.
kettlebell move.
Dumbbell.
Yeah.
You do it with kettlebell typically. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
not.
like to do that, and there's a girl that I watch sometimes, she went kinda off the deep end, but she could do the Turkish get up with basically half of her body weight in a
Mhm.
kettlebell, which is amazing, right? Um, but that one move, it works, like, every muscle in your body, going from flat on your back to standing with the kettlebell and then reversing it.
Mhm.
What do you think about things like that? Is that something I mean, because there's people like half my age who can't get on the floor and back up, which is sad.
Yeah, I mean that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I have taken care of people that have fallen at the home. They were by themselves. They couldn't get up. They lay there for 24 hours. They go into rhabdomyolysis because their muscle breaks down and destroys their kidneys. And they're just laying there, damaged and all that. And they can't move because they can't move. They can't circulate their blood. So all this damaged myoglobin clogs up their kidneys, and some of them end up dying because of that. Yeah, I mean, you should be able to get up and off. There's a similar things. Sit to stand test. I mean, it's like how can you sit up without using your hands to get out of a chair? And a lot of people can't. It's either
Mhm.
they're too heavy, they're too weak, their knees hurt too much, or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that capacity is important to be able to do that. Now, I mean, Turkish get ups are fine. I mean, and I've seen people do them with 200 pounds in their hand. That's pretty
Crazy.
amazing
Yeah.
as well. I mean, I think there's a world record of something like 250 pounds. Some
Yeah.
guy did holding a
Yeah.
250-pound barbell, which is quite. And I've done Turkish get ups. When I was doing jujitsu, we are on the ground a lot and rolling around and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And I don't like being on the ground. I got to tell you, as a tall guy, I don't like getting on the ground because it's a long way for me. But it's important. It is important to be able to.
I'm little, I don't have that far to go.
Yeah, no, I got a long ways down there, and so it's
So,
like,
yeah, interesting. Well, and the interesting thing is, like, for my dad, one of the things that he practices because he has physical therapy is because we do gardening and everything, like, his therapist has him getting down on his knees and back up, which to me is such a good thing for somebody who's in his 80s, right? To be able to stand up if you get on the ground, like you just said. So it's just this is an inspiring conversation to me. I it gives me hope because there's when we look around and we see the state of people's health or lack thereof, it can be pretty demotivating, right? But I love talking to you because it's just it just the world of possibilities is out there, and to be able to scale it from the level that you're capable of up to a higher level, and to do it without jumping right in and without getting injured, that's so key, right? So, thank you for inspiring us.
Yeah, I enjoy talking about this. Yeah, people know me for the carnivore diet, but I really am interested in this other stuff too, and I
I
think
can tell.
I'll be talking more about this stuff, particularly as I turn 60 and I dunk my
Yeah,
basketball and do my backflip and run my sub 6,400 meters and break the world record in rowing, and it'll give me a little more street cred, so I can say, "Hey, look, this is
yeah,
what I did to make it work, and I can maybe assist some other people in getting there." And so
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm I'm pursuing that and educating myself as well on a lot of the technicalities of some of this stuff, and it does. I mean, our brains and our bodies are inextricably linked, and what's good for our brain is good for our
mhm.
body and vice versa. And so it just
Yeah,
makes sense to be athletic and be able to move and
it
do
really
it
does,
and
yeah,
do what
and
God gave you the ability to do, right?
yes, yes, and one of the things I wanna do, I'm not in the season to do that right now because of being a caregiver, but I wanna go back to Hawaii and spend more time because I want to do, some more open ocean racing, and there's one in particular, it's a 26-mile open ocean, island to island from Maui to Molokai, and that's I'm not gonna say bucket list, but that's in my, window of going to do it. And so watching you and seeing what you're doing is really inspiring me. Not just inspiring, but giving me the, I guess, more tools in my tool chest because the fact is, I it's important for me to stay strong as I'm working up to whatever time in my life that is. It may be 10 years before I get there
Mhm.
just because of my life circumstances. But in the meantime, instead of like not doing anything and then all of a sudden gearing up to do it, it's going to be so much easier. Like you said, if you can sprint, you can walk, right?
Yeah.
And it's helping me to change my mindset about that type of preparation. It really is like
Well, and it's
that
fun
makes
because you see, like, once you start, you just realize you make progress. I mean, that's just the thing. You will
yeah,
make progress, which is exciting. It's inspiring. It's like,
yeah,
it gives you a purpose. It's like I don't just to sit there and just decay my whole life and end up staring blankly at the yelling at the TV in my recliner while eating my junk food. I mean, it's just that's just not where you want to go. So
yeah, yeah.
anyway, it's
Well,
been a good conversation for sure. Yeah.
it is. It's very exciting, and I would like to I'd love to pick this up. We're actually, kind of getting into this a second hour here, and I wanna, we should probably sign off just so we can give people, a good chunk of content to listen to without overwhelming them. There's a lot to chew on here, more than just a steak bone. Um, it's really good, very inspiring, and, I'm enjoying the comments here as well, and if you are listening, let us know, where you're listening from. We had a carnivore listener from Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you saw that on your channel. Um, that was pretty exciting. And, we've got listeners from all over. We weren't able to hook up, to the YouTube today with Dr. Baker's channel, but that will go up, I'm sure, on the YouTube at some point, and, we'll get the clips up and everything. So, please let us know where you're listening from, and please, as always, if you like the content you're seeing today, please hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe, like, follow, and share. There's so many people who need to hear what we're talking about here, and the way that we do that is by you sharing. That's why they call it social media, is for you getting this information out. And if you are not getting notifications and you want to, please be sure and sign up for my email list. Go to marygracemedia.com and get on the mailing list. You will get notified by email before we go live with these shows. And right now, we have them scheduled on an every other Friday basis. And so you can bookmark it, but also get on the website, get on the mailing list, marygracemedia.com, and we will notify you when we go live with these shows. And we're so excited about the enthusiasm and the feedback and all of your participation in the chat. We did say last time, I think, that we were going to do some Q&A, and we haven't really done that this time. So maybe we can get to it next time because we don't want to keep everybody here all day. But let's bookmark that and come back and do some Q&As, unless you wanna take a question or 2 now, but I wanna respect your time as well. Um
Yeah, I've gotta actually pack and get ready. I'm leaving. I'm going to Spain tomorrow, so I gotta get
Oh my
going
goodness,
doing that
okay.
stuff, so I'll be gone
Well,
next week, but yeah.
have a safe trip. You just got back from Portugal.
I did. Yeah, I was there 3 weeks ago, and now I'm in Spain, so yeah, it's kind of 2 trips across the pond for me, so
Keep racking up the miles.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, we have Roger on Facebook, started carnivore 3 weeks ago. Roger's a long-time listener on my Facebook, so good for you, that's awesome. I'll put up the carnivore book here one more time, The Carnivore
Yeah,
Diet.
let's do a dedicated Q&A next time if you want.
Yeah, I think
I'd
we
be
should
happy
do
to talk
that, yeah.
about it, so
So, everybody, please send your questions to me, info@marygracemedia.com, and we will start compiling the questions, info@marygracemedia.com, and then also, in the meantime, everybody go check out The Carnivore Diet by Dr. Shawn Baker, and then, again, check out Rivero.com. That is the online, medical clinic to help you get to the root cause and restore your health so that you can do all these things that we've just talked about today. And again, go to marygracemedia.com, get the links that we've talked about here, and also get on the mailing list. We will be back soon with another show, with another episode of Healing America and Beyond with Mary Grace and Dr. Shawn Baker. Everybody have a great day. Thank you so much.